Welcome everybody, and thank you very much for joining us. I'm very happy to be launching our THEMIS product and showing you all the capabilities and how we can help your organization save lots of time and money. By way of introduction, my name is John Brown. I'm the CEO of HELUX, and I'll be doing the first part of the presentation, which is some PowerPoint slides and just sort of framing the argument for why we think THEMIS is a great way for you to move forward with your information management program. And then Sham Tan, the CTO of HELUX, will be doing a demonstration of HELUX IIM Suite. Okay, let's jump in. So just quickly, so you have some idea of who HELUX is, what we're about. We're a Canadian-based company, and the way that I said about probably gave that away. We've recently been awarded from Microsoft the Microsoft Content Services Partner Program Preferred Partner designation, which is something that only a couple of dozen companies in the world hold that designation. So we're very proud to have been selected by Microsoft to be a charter member in that program. And as well as providing services around SharePoint, Office 365, Azure, Dynamics, and the Microsoft stack, we also develop software products, which we call THEMIS. THEMIS is, by way of introduction, THEMIS is the Greek goddess of balance and justice. So since we deal with risk and governance and compliance, an appropriate designation for our products. And the products aim to reimagine the way that we do information architecture and records management. Let's start the discussion by talking about where legacy ECM falls short. And there's lots of terms that we hear bandied about: enterprise content management, information management, intelligent information management, content services, and so forth. So where does the old ECM sort of fall off, and where does content services begin? Well, ECM, and the distinction that we draw is that ECM is a repository, a single repository where we would store documents and content. Content services is a way for us to be able to look for and find information no matter where it resides. So it doesn't need to reside in the ECM system, in a Documentum or SharePoint or whatever. It can reside in Dropbox, it can reside in file shares, it can reside in SAP systems, and we need to be able to manage that information no matter where it exists. So we're seeing a tremendous uptake, for instance, on Microsoft Teams and Google Slack. So how do we manage information in those repositories? How do we surface information to the right people at the right time in those repositories? And the legacy ECM systems just don't have that kind of capability. Where we talk about content services, it's the new paradigm, extending ECM to be able to surface information in places where it resides. What are some of the advantages of a new content services paradigm in your or program in your organization? Well, it streamlines workflows, allows you to make quicker and more informed decisions, better control over sensitive information for freedom of information requests and so forth, faster content discovery. So we always, there's all sorts of studies over the years that show that people spend 30% of their time looking for information or recreating information and so forth. We need to get away from that and improve those numbers. Intuitive access to information and collaboration. And so where does this take us? It's in terms of benefits. It's a better experience for our users and our customers to collaborate on that information, more content agility so that we can reuse and repurpose information, and better protection of the information. So from a customer's perspective, what does that mean? As we just stated, our content management approach has to be connected and integrated with everything. So we need to be able to see information across the spectrum of where it resides, and we need to match the user experience and maximize the user experience while still maintaining the governance and controls that the organization requires. So that balance between users being able to collaborate and having an open door to information and being able to find things easily, but the organization meeting its mandate for governance and risk and compliance. So balancing that completely open system with a need-to-know system. And each organization is going to be different on that spectrum in terms of their expectations. We need to find that balance for each and every organization. Study from AIM, the uptake of Office 365 has been just mind-blowing. 120 million Office 365 users today. Percentage of SharePoint online has risen from 22% in 2016 to 56% in 2017 and continues to rise. However, at the same time, people are still running SharePoint on-premise with older versions of SharePoint. So it's a transition that's taking some time, but it definitely is underway. We're seeing more and more organizations trust the cloud to all of their data. So organizations who are not IT driven, where IT is not their business, they're handing that responsibility to Azure, to AWS, and to the other cloud providers. And we're seeing that uptake at an extremely rapid rate at this point. So content services is changing. It's changing the way that people are creating content. The content is being created at record pace and in all kinds of different applications, whether it's Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter or Instagram or Teams or Slack or the traditional Office, emails and so forth. It just continues to grow exponentially. And employees expect to be able to collaborate across all of these apps and be able to surface information to help them make decisions. And the organization expects to be able to surface that information for reporting and dashboarding information. So things like Power BI take on a life. We know that artificial intelligence is coming and is being accelerated throughout organizations. So we need to be able to take advantage of new approaches in machine learning and so forth. And at the same time, we need to make sure that we're protecting data. Data sovereignty is a big issue. GDPR. I mean, I think probably all of us see GDPR webinars pop into our inboxes every week as that becomes more predominant and is a de facto standard across not just Europe, but North America and the Far East as well. So we need to look at how we're taking advantage of content services and what's the approach that we need to do. We need to enable anywhere, anytime, any device access. So what does that mean? It means that we need to have a strategy for tablets, for mobile, for people who are on the road, for people who are at their desk. We need to make sure that no matter where somebody is, where they're located, or what device they're using, that they have ready access to that information that they need. We need to give them visibility and insight into that information through reporting and dashboarding, and we need to fully integrate all of those services for collaboration, integrated intelligence, and the sharing of data and apps. So what's in the way of that? Right now, organizations struggle to deliver the content to the people who need it. Studies show that from Forrester that 67% of employees do not have mobile access to an ECM system. So they're effectively shut out from information that they need. Salespeople who can't access a CRM system, etc. The sheer volume of information that's coming at an organization or a person on a daily basis, it can be overwhelming to deal with. It's coming at me on Facebook, it's coming at me on LinkedIn, it's coming at me on Twitter, it's coming at me in emails. And then it's easy to get frustrated with all of that. And then the inability to be able to share, reuse, and repurpose information so that we always know that we're looking at the right version of a document, and that I know that the version of the truth that's in that document is what I can execute on and what I can report on, whether that's to a regulatory body or to my boss or whatever, that I can know that that information is accurate and correct and up to date. So all of that is great. Those are all worthy goals and a great vision, but how do we get there? Well, the answer is that we get there through having a great information architecture. And a great information architecture really is an intersection of content, context, and users, so that we can make sure that we're meeting user demands in terms of findability of information, that they can navigate to information easily, that they can search for information easily using metadata, and that they're getting that information in context. A great information architecture also leads you to a great records management program so that we can do things like labeling and file plans and assign taxonomies and so forth to make it easy for the back end of the system to work like it should. So we have the full life cycle of content at our fingertips, right from the time that it's created until the time that it's archived or disposed, that we know what kind of content it is and we can search for it easily. Why has this been so hard in the past, and why have ECM deployments failed? Well, too many times we see SharePoint the shortcut, which is, well, SharePoint's easy. We've got a license for it. Let's roll it out. And essentially what a lot of organizations have done is they've rolled their file shares out into a browser environment. And that's, a great pat in the back, congratulations, but we still can't find information. We can't access information. We don't have a plan for how to roll out that information and how to make sure that the right people are getting the right content at the right time. And the other part of that is that information architecture process is time consuming, it's expensive, and we've never had the right tools for the job until now. With THEMIS, we looked at a set of questions of what if we delivered a great experience for the users and superior ROI for the business at the information architecture level? What if users could instantly understand what we need from them without putting all the IA jargon in front of them, without taxonomies and classifications and all the library sciences terms that just send people running from the room as soon as you say that we've got an information management program. Getting participation in that has been really hard because there's terms that are used that people just don't understand. So what we want to be able to do is create a software program where we provide users with instant feedback and rapid application development. They can instantly see the results of their work. So they're the subject matter experts. They know what content they're creating, what metadata is attached to that. Let's give them some immediate results in terms of what it's going to look like in SharePoint and how they're going to interact with this exciting new technology. We can demonstrate that SharePoint sites can be provisioned in half the time with double the impact on findability. A recent client of ours, for instance, looked at developing and provisioning SharePoint sites for 50 business units. They looked at the old way, the traditional way of doing information architecture, putting together a team of information architects and designers and project managers and developers and QA people, and an endless stream of processes and people interacting with no quick wins, no demonstrable wins to the end users. We've been at this for a long time. We know from experience that this would take about 4 years. We've been involved with projects before we developed THEMIS, where a large organization could take 3 or 4 years to fully deploy an information architecture that made sense in SharePoint. So with THEMIS, we've got current clients who are deploying the same kind of information architecture to 10, 12,000 people, 50 functional business unit sites. The team is a third of the size. It just involves an information architect, a project manager, and a business analyst. And instead of 4 years, we can do it in 1 year. And the ROI is 70% over traditional approaches to IA, which is, tremendous cost savings to the organization. And it also demonstrates wins to the end users so that you're not inviting them to requirements meetings in October of 2018 and then rolling out a solution in January of 2020. They're seeing results within a few days from when we first sit down with them, and we're refining the story and we're getting accurate information to them and making sure that at the end of the day, this is going to be the best SharePoint experience that they've ever had.
What I want to show you guys today is THEMIS IAM Suite. It actually consists of 2 products. What John heavily talked about was THEMIS IA, which is the information architecture design and publishing tool. As an added bonus, we're going to also take a look at the THEMIS RM capabilities that allows you to apply retention policies on documents and records that are spread across multiple locations and multiple repositories. John lightly touched on the typical 2 approaches that we've seen. Just want to revisit that topic a little bit more, and it kind of frames the the demo here. The first approach is having IT going gung-ho and releasing SharePoint sites as if they were candy, therefore providing SharePoint sites with no actual structure, no actual information architecture, and expect the business users to deal with the support and the implementation and the usage of it, which never really goes the right way. The second approach is having a heavy team of information architects, records managers, provide a proper information architecture that could consist of 2 to 3 years, as we talked before. And difficulty of that is that you may have business users no longer engaged because now they're being bombarded with records management speak, and that typically means that the users are no longer engaged. First approach, you have IT trying to do it their way, and the second approach, you have IM trying to do it their way. What THEMIS really provides is a happy medium that allows us to make the IM guys happy as well as the IT folks happy. So how do we streamline the information architecture? Well, we do that by first creating a information architecture project that consists of a concept called workspaces. In the old way, we would have a divide and conquer approach where we would assign a designer or an IA designer, talk to each business unit, and come up with a site structure, information architecture that works for them. That could be a separate Excel spreadsheet that each of these guys would have and approve. Aggregating all those Excel spreadsheets becomes very difficult to do. So the idea here is to mimic that experience, but to capture that information within THEMIS. So inside the workspace, you have the ability to assign people who's involved with the design, as well as people who's involved with reviewing design. There will be members of the business units that will be part of this design session. And as part of the governance strategy, we also standardize certain permission sets that if you want to go towards a more controlled environment, you can do so by manipulating and creating your own permissions model that is a little bit more strict than what SharePoint provides out of the box. Now, dealing with the old way, you had Excel spreadsheets and a lot of this information architecture that's defined in possibly one centralized spreadsheet that each of the designers would look at and update as soon as they aggregate additional information. It makes it very hard if one particular group of people come up with really good idea for a content type and a set of metadata fields, and having another group of people be able to leverage that right away. So in order to achieve that reusability side of things, we introduced a concept called enterprise workspace, which really means all the content types and all the metadata fields would be global and available to any of the workspaces that are looking to create a SharePoint site or an information architecture. So ideally, doing this for quite some time, we would preload the enterprise workspace with all the standard content types that we've come across throughout the different spaces like government, medical, and things like that. We would load them with all these standards enterprise content types. As an example here, we have one just for then we'll put an HELUX document-based content type that consists of a title, document status, and publication date. As you can see, these are the types of metadata fields that you would expect in SharePoint. And as well, you can also create content types that inherit from it. Once you have these content types defined in the enterprise, someone who is ready to start the site design can go into THEMIS, launch up their workspace. Obviously, the workspace that you've been invited into will be the only ones that you can see. Launch up the finance workspace. As you can see here, I can create a whole site structure that consists of a top-level site, sub-sites, as well as libraries and lists. All the configurable parameters that you would get in a SharePoint environment are also defined here within THEMIS. However, you are being presented in a more easy to consume view. As you present this to your business users, they can really see how the structure of their sites and subsites are going to look like within SharePoint. When I engage business users, I really stay away from the SharePoint terminology. I talk to them about I explain things in terms of folders and top level folders and subfolders, and look at things such as tags to explain what metadata is. So I look at a particular document library here called accounts payable. I have all the necessary parameters, name, description. I can enable versioning, major and minor. I can disable it. I can also decide what kind of experience I want. In this case, this was an existing one. I can do either a modern experience or the classic experience. And SharePoint Online, obviously the modern experience is the way to go. We have also an option here to disable folder creation. A lot of times, some of our clients that are really into metadata use don't want folders to be created, and they want all documents to be tagged with 2 or 3 sets of metadata so that they can have an ability to kind of slice and dice the list of documents the way you would do in an Excel spreadsheet. Now here's the interesting part of this is that when people are looking to create their top level folders and subfolders, they want to know what's available as a content type. And the only way to do that is to present them all the ones that you've created so far. So this drop down here basically shows all the content types that have been defined in the system so far. So going back to my original point, if you actually preload it with all the enterprise stuff that you've done before from your previous projects, they would have kind of an a la carte version of this to pick from, and therefore don't have to come up with their own. This also promotes reusability. So if I create a content type in one workspace, call that say a meeting minute document type, that content type would become in another workspace, and again promoting reusability and enterprise content types across the board. Obviously, we can also define permissions. We have the ability to manage or create SharePoint security groups that will allow us to, we'll pick one here called financiers, that will allow us to assign the permission sets that you saw that was defined initially in the project's setup. Default values is another ability that we provided as well. And to increase findability and searchability, you need to have metadata. It's no doubt about that. The concept of garbage in, garbage out, it stays true with SharePoint. If you don't have metadata inside a SharePoint site, it's essentially, you get the same experiences you get working with a shared drive. Obviously, having additional metadata increases the amount of clicks that you would have to do to upload a document. Users, they like, the least path of resistance. So by supplying either default values or being able to infer some of that stuff and having metadata values being defaulted helps with the user adoption and also reduces the amount of clicks. So if you can assign default value where it makes sense, then you would do so. Ideally, we would have 2 or 3 required fields. Again, trying to maintain that high level user adoption and not have users be overwhelmed with so much clicks just to upload a document within SharePoint. Jumping quickly into the taxonomy design. This is going to be very familiar to a lot of you guys who's worked with SharePoint. We have the ability to create, term groups, term sets, terms, and things like that. We also have, be able to mark them available for tagging, and inside a term set, we can supply different labels for different languages. So right now we're on the client's term set. So that's a list of business clients for the finance department. One of the things that we found very tedious and time consuming is that we may get a large list of labels or terms that the user wants to manage. For instance, a list of clients, they could have upwards to 1,000, several thousand, or maybe to 10,000 items. What we've done in the past is we've created PowerShell scripts to kind of consume a common deleted file and import those terms inside of SharePoint itself. Now, to expect someone to do that manually, that's just goddamn crazy. You wouldn't do that in the first place. So what we've done is we've created the ability to import a CSV. So if you have a list of clients, save it as a common delivered file through Excel and import it here. THEMIS will take care of the rest. Going back to site design here real quick. Again, the old way, we would use Excel to capture the information architecture. We go through the requirements here, and at some point deliver that design to a set of developers. Then they would produce the SharePoint site, go through a very tedious user acceptance process, and then finally have a go live session, and the sites are available for the end users. What we found with this old approach is that UAT tends to take quite a bit of time. People who are involved in the SharePoint sessions don't really understand SharePoint. So when it comes to designing a site that works for them, they don't really get it until they actually see their site. They're playing with their site, right? So this becomes problematic and therefore lengthens the UAT process. So what we've done manually just to help with that is we would mock up SharePoint sites based on some sort of initial design that we have, and give them something to look at, something to play with, and therefore they would understand SharePoint better and provide better feedback when it comes to designing their sites. This is great. However, this requires a lot of man hours. You're sitting there in SharePoint and you're clicking away to create content, creating sites, libraries, and knowing that it could be throwaway code, right? So what THEMIS provides to help with that and streamline this process is what we call rapid prototyping. So we have the structure defined here. We have a finance site here that has 4 libraries, right? This is something that we come up with as their initial design. If we go and jump into the publishing screens here, we can create a publishing job. Hey, that's amazing. There's 3 types of jobs here. We have the ability to push out taxonomy. So, forget those PowerShell scripts that you use to push out a large list of term sets. We can publish taxonomy. We can also publish content types as well. Be able to publish content types to multiple sites or a single site. And if you're ready to push out a full set of sites, we can do that as well. So let's go ahead and click on the site design that we looked at earlier. I select my environment. With the concept of environment is that we can actually configure multiple environments here. Ideally, we would have a environment configured for a sandbox and an environment configured for production. So all the iterative design sessions that you have and the sandbox sites that you're creating, you can push that to a sandbox site. And when you have the final design, you can push out to a production environment. For the sake of this demo, we'll just be working with one environment. So I'm creating a new job. I want to push out the finite sites here. Let's give a finite sites job. Click on next, deselect human resources as our sites, and click that one site, finance template. I think I have one already created, so I'm gonna go with 22 as the URL. So I'll go ahead. Yes, this is all I want to push out. You can see here that it's deploying the finance demo 2, and these are the libraries that it's going to deploy to. So I click on save and run. What happens now is that it's going to be queued for validation. A background job is going to run. The validation process is really a process that allows you, the publisher, to see whether or not you can actually go ahead with the publishing to that particular environment. You may have things that it's going to conflict with, and therefore gives you an opportunity to fix them before you actually do the live publishing. Okay, so finance sites job, I believe that's the one we created. There we go. We have a couple warnings, and the warnings that you get are, things like, oh, we have a term set called document status already. We have a term set, and it's just nothing to be concerned about. What you see highlighted in green are all good. There is a finance demo 22. That site doesn't exist, so we're able to publish. So I'm happy with this. Let's go ahead and publish that. It's this whole concept of connectors. We can connect to, right now, SharePoint Online, SharePoint On-Prem 2016, SharePoint On-Prem 2013. We plan on connecting to file shares as well as dynamic CRM. We're also looking at OpenText as another possibility. And John just indicated to me Teams is also on the product roadmap as well. So just to wrap up here, essentially, we would push out the SharePoint site for them. The users would be able to interact with that SharePoint site and then come back to the drawing board and give us better feedback in terms of how they want to tweak the design. We would go through that process a few times and then ultimately publish to their production environment. RM stands for Records Management. And the reason why we built THEMIS RM in the first place was that this whole information architecture, design, and everything really lends itself well to records management because of all the structure and policies that we can define based on the architecture. Now, what we've done is we've taken a different approach. Typical RM solutions have been kind of more of the ECM way of doing things, meaning you have a central repository for all the records to live in as soon as it becomes a record. The problem with that is that the user adoption for declaring records is very low. When someone declares something as record, it basically goes into this abyss and no one is able to find it, and therefore no one's declaring records. So what we push for is an in-place records solution. Not only that, our product THEMIS does not actually store the records. It basically crawls and index records from multiple sources and aggregates them in one central view that is based on your file plan classification as opposed to something else. And one thing that we notice is that we're working with SharePoint is in building a SharePoint site, RM tends to create a structure that matches their file plan structure. That doesn't really work for end users. You want to build a structure that works for them based on how they see their documents categorized. And because we have THEMIS RM in play here, we're able to kind of map those documents from the user-defined structure back to the file plan classification. So as you can see here, I'm drilling down to a file plan. I can see I have 4 categories: communications, finance management, human resources, and information technology. I can define the title, the category number, the description, what kind of legal justification is is enforcing this policy, and the retention rules, which we can find as a drop down, 1 year, 10 years, 2 years, and the different types of retention triggers, which in this case we have period-based, relationship-based, and event-based. Another thing interesting to note is that we also have a disposition approval process. As an RM, which can consist of 1 or 2 people, they're pretty much a small team. And then anyone who's dealt with records management is that they're very hesitant to delete any records. So what we've done is we built an approval process where the records managers can actually go and submit the records that are up for disposition to the reviewer, who then decides whether or not they should submit it for approval. And if it's approved, it will then be destroyed, and then destruction certificate will be created. Real quickly here, I just want to show you some of the admin settings here. We have the ability to automatically declare records. So when something is triggered by a metadata field, in this case would be document status, it is set to final, it would actually declare that as a record. We have the ability to update to the major version if major and minor is also configured for that library when the document becomes a record. We also have automatic classification. And quickly here, I want to show you what that is. Automatic classification has really a set of conditions that you can create to auto-classify your document or your record. So in this case, we have a rule called accounts payable records, and the condition is set to of type URL. So any records that is inside the accounts payable library will be mapped to the finance management accounts payable node here. The conditions that we offer are 2 types right now. One is based on the URL, so you can use that to define records that are coming from a site, subsite, document library, or folder that would be classified to a particular file plan node. The other condition is based on content type. So if you have a financial report content type, anything that's been associated to that content type will be mapped to a particular file plan node. The other 2 that we are introducing is metadata. So if there's certain metadata in that document that is set to a certain value, you can classify it. And then the last one is using artificial intelligence to help with providing a little bit more smarts in terms of how classification would occur. All right, so once you've defined your classification rules, your file plan, and THEMIS does its job, it crawls the records and it indexes it, you're able to now explore your records inside of THEMIS. The unclassified node basically gives you all records that haven't been classified, and you have the ability to either create an auto classification rule or move them to a particular file plan node itself. I actually have records in one node here, accounts payable, and that was coming from my SharePoint site. And as you can see, I have to find the declared date, cutoff date, the disposition status. I can also apply a legal hold. I can move undeclared from here as well as a records manager. I can search the records quite easily from here as well. All right, so jumping into disposition reports, as I said before, we can create a disposition report to report what records are up for disposition. I have one that's already created that has 9 records, so let's quickly go into that. As you can see here, 9 records have been up for disposition. It was the records that you saw in the accounts payable file plan node earlier. All these documents or all these records have already been submitted for review. So as a reviewer, you can actually go into THEMIS, look at your queue of things to review under disposition, and decide whether or not you want to submit it for approval, or you can also reject it. Anything that gets rejected goes back in the queue and gets reported later in a different disposition report. Once it goes to approval, anyone who's assigned approval capabilities and it has been assigned to approve these records now has the ability to approve it or reject it as well. Once things are approved for disposition, a destruction certificate gets created and stored inside of THEMIS. So that's essentially THEMIS RM in a nutshell. I just want to wrap up here and look at my publishing job. There you go, finance site's job. It's published. As you can see, this should be a modern site, yes. Again, standard template. If I go to site contents, I should have my 4 libraries, accounts payable, receivable, long-term libraries, and reporting there. If I drill it down to accounts payable, I should have that content type, finance document, that was configured to. So again, this allows us to really create sites relatively quickly with a proper information architecture and yeah, doing less time.